Yeah, and that again, so I mean, that kind of hits back to this general theme we've been talking on, is this, there's been this rise of paganism coming back, and it's not, and even though it's really kicked off more recently, it has been in development for quite a while now. So this kind of leads me to the next area that we wanted to focus on in this talk, is the in the late 1800s, we see this kind of resurgence of paganism and classical thinking and looking into the occult and mystery traditions, and that it was starting to come back then, and how that was actually twisted and played on, that trauma was played on with the Germanic people and the rise of the Nazi Party,
Yes.
with the occult influences of the Thule Society and Rudolf Hess and things like that. Which you have for those who don't know, Thomas has a book on this as well, called Walpurgis, which another excellent book to check out and read. Thomas, would you kind of like to shift into addressing some of that and get into that area of things?
At certain times in history, a portal is opened. It's almost like magic becomes more available. Mm-hmm. That they use an expression that the New Agers use, the veil thins, and that's fair enough. That's quite a good way to describe it.
Right.
The Renaissance was a period when that happened. The Enlightenment was when that happened. And another period when it happened was something happened, and it was the biggest one of all, between about 1888 and 1919. It all happened in then. We had the development of quantum physics. We had Carl Jung. We had Jack Parsons. We had Crowley. We had William Butler Yeats in the Gaelic Revival. We had the Golden Dawn. We had the growth of all these esoteric spiritual. It was endless. The development of radio and TV in that period was driven directly to contact, quote unquote, spirits. It just went. Right. It was one of those portals that opened, and it happened all over the world. It was very big in America, and it happened in one place. It was long overdue, and it missed out on it during the Enlightenment, and also because of the stranglehold that Lutheranism had upon it, was Germany. Something happened in Germany in the late Victorian 1880s, 1890s, where suddenly people became very interested in spiritual ideas that were outside of Christianity. And to the point where the Germanic Freemasonry is very different than, say, like English-speak American Freemasonry, Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the Grand Lodge of Ireland. They're quite different. Germanic Freemasonry is different, and it's based on the Swedish Rite, and the Swedish Rite, for some reason, is has a different approach to the esoteric tradition. Now, the growth of Freemasonry it was the beginning of it, but then something happened. It sparked off an ancestral memory. It unlocked memory codes in the German people. And you had the growth of the Folkish and the Wandervogel movement. These were young Germans who just took an interest in nature. And they used to do things like walk through the forest, through the Odenwald, through the Black Forest, through the Hesse Mountains, up around those areas, singing folk songs. It was a pure folk revival. And it didn't only go on in Germany. It happened in Ireland too. In Ireland, you had the Gaelic revival, that when there was an incredible man called, what was his name? It'll come to me, sorry. But anyway, there was a revival in a thing called the Gaelic League, where someone sat down one day and says, we're not Irish anymore. There's only 6 books of the Irish language printed every year. We're becoming English. And these guys said about reviving that Celtic artwork that's behind you, Logan. That was all lost. And there was these people who started digging through the archives and everything and discovered that those Celtic designs and spirals behind you. And They revived the Irish language to the point where there's something like 6,000 books in Irish published every year now. And that started with Douglas Hyde was the man's name. And interesting, he became the first president of the independent Ireland. And here's another one. Where he grew up was a place called Owen the Gat Cave, which is, I've climbed down it myself. It was a sacred cave. The Christians called it the entrance to hell, but the pagans said it was the opening where the Morrigan came out on Samhain and Halloween, and it was a place of magic to this day. He had carved his initials on the wall as a young man. They're still there, and then he was actually inspired by the goddess energy under the ground, and to go and form the Gaelic League. So that happened in Ireland, but it happened, that's just say it was everywhere. And in fact, even things like the Golden Dawn were just like, even though they were Kabbalistic based, you had like Scottish characters, and they were wanting William Butler Yeats Irish and others. There's something more to this world. And so in Germany, you had the rise of the Germanic Hexan and folk traditions, the Folkish movements, the Wandervogel movements. And they would go to places like the Echensteine, which is that rock formation that you're using on our profile picture here in northern Germany. And they were where they were was a belief that these were places of Saxon greatness, and that the German people had been damaged by this Abrahamic thing. But it wasn't rooted in hatred. It wasn't like, that's something that historians, that was something until the socialists, let's remember that's what National Socialism is, the Marxists, came along and then associated with attacking, anti-Semitic and everything. And also any anti-Semitic and hatred of other races that existed in that period was among the wealthy Germans who went to Wagner operas and had the money to go to them. The ordinary average German person was just only interested in recapturing what his ancestors did. There was no political mandate. And this is, now I want everybody listening to this broadcast to pay careful attention. This is something we must be very careful of with the growth of this new pagan revival, that we do not let the same forces that co-opted the last one in Germany, the political forces, to take it over and weaponize it. We must never allow politicians to have our paganism, because look what happened in Germany. You had characters like Maria Vilgot coming out of Austria, who had these fantastic ideas that maybe Jesus was actually Odin, and that the actual, very plausible ideas that the crucifixion was actually Odin hanging on the Yggdrasil tree. This was way out there. That's how the only reason they made us Christians was we actually co-opt the Odin thing, and this was, you're talking about the early part of the century. And he was getting it. This is way out there stuff that he was putting out there, that the ancient civilizations were highly advanced. They had pagan societies were highly advanced. They had great understandings of technology, the cosmos, astronomy, science. And he was taken by Himmler and made the kind of like an advisor within Wewelsburg Castle, which was the kind of like temple of the SS. And they sidelined him and threw him out because he wanted to stick with the pagan stuff and not to be too political. And so he was shoved out of the way because he wasn't political enough. And the whole narrative is that Himmler got rid of him because he was too crazy for Himmler. No, he was too pagan for Himmler. That's what was really going on. Now, what happened was that these folkish movements were very successful. There was a real pagan revival happening through the middle classes, to a lesser degree, mostly the country people, and also people who lived in the cities who wanted to go and hike in the woods and sing folk songs and this kind of thing, tell folk tales around the campfire. Beautiful, wonderful stuff. World War I happened. World War I, in my opinion, was a population reduction called by the royal families of Europe, who were all interbred, who were seeing this mass unemployment happening. The factories were closing. There wasn't enough jobs for the masses, and they were terrified what was happening in Russia was going to happen in every country in Europe. So they started this Great War thing, which is totally esoteric. All you have to everything about it, even the way it ended, the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th hour, it was all Freemasonic. And all these people, young men, went to war. Now, there was 250,000 occultists in the German army, in the Wehrmacht during World War I. Now, they called them occultists, they were pagans, or they were people involved in similar things, similar ideas. The ones that weren't killed and came back home, came back to a Germany that was in a very bad way. It was being punished with having loan repayments. You had the Bolsheviks trying to take over everywhere. There was mini revolutions, mini Soviets being set up in Bavaria, and the the power, a unifying force that was seen in this was they looked back and they said the Völkisch movement, the von der Vogel movement. This is the way we can politicize the German people again. And in the early days of the National Socialists, they had absolutely no interest in this stuff. The National Socialist Workers' Party, the NSPD, or it was called, they just were purely basically pushing a form of Marxism. It wasn't until something very strange happened when, during the Munich uprising in 1919, an organization called the Thule Society with Rudolf Hess and Ernst Röhm met in the Intercontinental Hotel in Munich, and the Bolsheviks executed two members of it, a guy called a noble called Turn van Taxis, and another woman who was a member of the aristocrat, as well as some poor Jewish guy they pulled off the street and shot him because he was seen beside an anti-Bolshevik poster. So this is what the Bolsheviks were like. They would kill anybody, right? And they were shot with dum-dum bullets that were basically just blew their bodies apart. And it was used as a great thing. But what happened was there was a seance in the Intercontinental Hotel a few weeks later with Rudolf Hess, and the spirits of the two murdered Thule member societies appeared in the seance. And they said that a new Germanic leader would appear at any moment. And at this time, Adolf Hitler was recovering in hospital from basically a nervous breakdown from the Versailles Treaty. And they said, and this division said he would come. He literally walked in a few weeks later after he got out of his discharge from his barracks in Bavaria, his regiment. He walked into the Thule Society, and basically Rudolf Hess saw him and said, "That's our man." Now, it's unbelievable.
Well, and didn't he recognize him from a painting or something as well, right? Or a vision or a dream, isn't something to that nature?
What happened was that Adolf Hitler himself was also going through his own pagan revival before the war and after. But he was there was a German painter called Franz von Franz, come with me, and it's very late at night here, and he painted a picture of Wotan on horseback charging through a village, and it was Adolf Hitler on the horse's back. The forelock combed over, the little moustache, everything. He also painted a painting of Medusa that looked just like Adolf Hitler's mother. Identical. Couldn't tell the difference between the two. And Franz von, oh God, I hate when this happens. But anyway, I have a lot in my head, and I haven't spoken about the subject in ages. But anyway, there was, look, the Third Reich was an occult organization that dabbled in politics. As simple as that. Not the other way around. They were primarily an occult, or they came out of a pagan revival which they co-opted, and the early ones who were involved in the pagan aspects of it were either dismissed or shot, like a lot of the brown shirts. They were shot. And a purely political version came in, but they were still practicing it secretly in the background. The SS, and this is what I'm saying, we must never let governments take control of what we have, because Germany has taught us what goes wrong. Remember, right. Germany has showed us what went wrong that time in Germany. And we must stay well out of politics, left wing, right wing, I don't care. That's not our gig. That's not ours. We can observe it and enjoy it for satire, like I do.
Get a great laugh out of it.
like I did. I mean, 3 years ago, I was saying everybody vote for Trump, not because I'm a conservative, but we are going to have the best entertainment we've had in years. And we did, right. And that was the reason. That was the reason. And it was also there's a Luciferian aspect to that exposed just how crazy the left were. You know, we knew right. we knew the right wing was mad, but we didn't know how utterly crazy the left wing was. And he became a Luciferian element.
Too, that that shortly after he was elected, all of a sudden there was all these what do you call it? Progressive, left, like witches that were hexing.
Oh, that
Trump
was
and
hilarious.
saying, what a joke!
It's what all the atheists were suddenly pro-witchcraft. Just like they
Trump
don't
is
have any problem that
literally
Greta. All the atheists now believe that Greta Thunberg is okay as you can see carbon dioxide. So even they all become spellbound when they have to. Yeah, that was hilarious. That the mass binding ritual. That was the entertainment. That was beyond the entertainment I was hoping for.
Yeah, wrong card.
Yeah. And they all ended up hexing themselves because they were
backfired.
They knew anything about magic is that when you put your energy towards someone, either hate or love, they're harvesting that energy and you're depleting. This is why all these politicians, you can hate until the crows come home, and they only get more and more powerful because they're sucking it up. And that's another and that's why
charge. That's why everything they do is to polarize people and just rile them up and then just siphon the energy.
Yeah, your haters are a cash crop. Yeah. Grow them, let them harvest themselves, and then take it to the bank. And that's what it is. And that's how you build your charisma up. Thank you for hating me. Thank you for depleting your life energy. Thank you. That's really kind of you.
It's exhausting just for me to watch it happen because people just get played like a fiddle, like again and again and again, and they never realize what's happening.
Oh no, it's like in England now at the Brexit thing. They all hate the current prime minister, and he just gets more and more powerful. And when you like Trump, they got more powerful. You charge it up. The best thing is apathy.
Well, he loves it. And think about how Trump is like the quintessential archetypal toxic masculine to trigger all the left. I mean, it's like clockwork, and people don't see that this is what's happening.
No, they never will, because a sizable proportion of the human race are basically what I call meat golems. They're just flesh automatons suspended in a sea of state sorcery. That's all they are. And well, anyway, but back to Germany. I know we're going, but back to what happened in Germany. That's what happened. Basically, we had another pagan revival, and it was co-opted by political forces. But it didn't, and that's the great warning for us today, is to not. If they start inviting us to their dinner parties, we're on a diet that
day. We can really see how many parallels there already are in the current energetic climate that's happening. How it would be so easy to do that again.
Yeah.
And
also,
they're still playing to the same psychological. It's all trauma-based mind control, just like you were saying. In Germany, they played to that intergenerational ancestral trauma of what the Christians did to the Germanic people way back when, and it was all. It never went anywhere. It was just right there, lurking beneath the surface of this subconscious mind.
And got triggered in World War I. So that that trauma was fresh and then got played on, and you see this, obviously in the Nazi Party, we can see them, incorporating a lot of these, magical symbols, like, obviously with the SS, it's the Thule roots, so they keep, they're incorporating these things. And I think that's something for those of us who are part of this movement now to be aware of. So if we start seeing political parties who are incorporating things like that, well, that's a surefire sign. We need to, step back and take a look at things and remember that the animist and pagan mindset is coming back down to the level of the individual. It is not this groupthink mind virus out of the Middle East. It's a totally different foundational mindset to operate from.
Sorry, go ahead, Logan.
Oh, just one comment here. I also want to add that healing here is so very important, because you can think that you're studying history and knowing exactly, this is how it happened and now we're steeled from it. It's not in the conscious mind. Your trauma is in the subconscious mind, and if you're not working at that level, by specifically stepping into ritual and working with the emotions and with the fears and the pain that's coming up in that, that can be triggered in a split second, no matter what you think you've done intellectually or consciously.
Yeah, back in January, I visited Wewelsburg Castle in Germany. There's the great citadel of the SS, and I had it all to myself because I locked the Germans out. What happened was I was no, I did. I locked the Germans out. Typical Irish bastard. Yeah. No, it was January and there wasn't many tourists around, so I was in the castle and I'm walking around the castle. And I've never seen a more huge collection of pagan artifacts anywhere on Earth. It was there, and I was getting really pissed off. And I was literally the only person in the castle. There was no one else there. And I was walking around all the rooms, looking at all the displays. And then in the basement, they have the evil SS display. And it's just endless runes, endless swastika, endless folk magic, folk items. And I was like, this is the biggest collection of Germanic magic objects, magical exhibits anywhere in the world. There's nothing even come close to this. And I'm like furious then. And then I wanted to see the famous crypt where the SS in the basement did their rituals. And so I did the little tour thing on my own, no one in the place. And then I go into the crypt on my own and there's no one around. And I said, well, fuck this. This is all mine. So there was only one way into the place. And that was the upper gate there was construction done on it. But in the lower courtyard area of the castle, there was one gate in for the tourists. So I went over to it and there was a wheelbarrow and a shovel there. And I put them up against the gate, locking it. And I locked the gate on the inside to make it look like we're under construction now. You can't come in right now. And Germans, being what they are, obedient people, were coming down, seeing this, and they're going, "Oh, there's construction going on." No, it was some Irish gobshite who was like, he was locking them out. So I ran back. I've got it all on camera too. I ran back into the crypt temple, and I went upstairs to where the black sun symbol is, and I had 2 hours in this place all to myself, and there's no CCTV cameras or anything, and it says do not take photographs, and I didn't, just in case there was small cameras. But the black sun, this place is amazing. These people, the SS, had a spectacular understanding of paganism. They really were the real deal. And at the top of the so-called chamber, at the top where they have the meeting room and that black sun circle thing on the floor, it's not black, it's green. It's inlaid green marble. Someone just called it the black sun. It's actually made of green. In the North Tower, it's inlaid green marble. So that was like, why did it tell us it's inlaid? Why did it call it the black sun when it's green? Immediately, it was looking like the Yggdrasil tree from the top, looking down on the tree. And also, it looks like electricity spiraling out. A lot of the helm of all behind you, a transmission thing. Directly underneath that, in the crypt at the top, is the swastika. And then it dawned on me, this was an ancient temple, and before it came here. Now remember, the Romans were there, the Celts were there, the Germanic tribes were there. Something just told me that this was a temple of Lucifer. Now Lucifer is a pagan god, a Roman pagan god. The only reason people think Lucifer is the devil is because of a mistranslation in the King James Bible. They translated the word in Hebrew incorrectly. Lucifer is a classical pagan god, the son of Aurora and the brother of Diana. And Diana was a big pagan god among the Romans in that part of Germany at that time, as well as there was Saxon archetypes, but I just had it overcome by this. So I did an invocation of Lucifer on my how unbelievably. When I think about that now, I was a bit, I was a bit out there to be in the SS crypt doing the invocation of Lucifer on my own, and I had the most amazing experiences afterwards. That's another story, but here's the thing. I felt no sense of evil. You understand? Like you watch these Discovery Channel, History Channel, and this is where the Nazis did their demonic SS ceremonies. And you expect a sense of pure evil in this place. Quite the opposite. I found it quite beautiful. Because I wasn't going in there listening to a tour guide saying this is where all the evil men did evil things. These people, Himmler and the rest of them, or Maria Vilgut, Carl Maria Vilgut, had a very sophisticated understanding of paganism. Not just Germanic paganism, but classical paganism as well. They knew exactly what they were doing. This was to be built into a whole city at one time, almost like they called it the Vatican of paganism. Mm-hmm. The route, the spot that they had picked to where they were building a sacred pool, where we're told obviously where this kind of revitalization of the Germanic mysteries, the Teutonic Knights. There was nothing of the sort. They were building a pure pagan temple. Well, actually, I shouldn't say they were building it. They were modeling it. And in exactly the same way that Vulcan erupted at Notre Dame, Lucifer and Diana and the Saxon pagan gods are present in the North Tower at Wewelsburg. They had erupted in there. And I felt that power so strongly, like nothing. And then I walked out of the place, opened the gates, let the German tourists back in, and walked away from that literally energized. It wasn't that I have no sympathy for these totalitarian military structures, the government, the SS, the horrors they unleashed. This is purely me talking in honest terms. The North Tower at Wewelsburg Castle was a very calming pagan temple to me as a pagan. Maybe an Abrahamic would have a different vibe going in there and be terrified by it. But that's what it felt to me, and I feel I'm not going to do the cliche. Oh, I went in there, I felt the evil of the Third Reich and the evil of the Nazis. I felt the beauty of Germanic and classical paganism. That's what I felt, and it showed the power of that the old gods, Lucifer, Diana, that the Saxon gods, they had defeated. They were the ones who had defeated National Socialism, not the Bolsheviks. They were the ones who had defeated them.
Right. Well, and that's very interesting that you say that, because one of the things that we can see is that the bearing of the hammer, the representation of Thunar, and with my experience with Thor, it's very much an archetype that is about respect of all human beings, no matter who they are, what race, belief system. It doesn't matter. It's a respecting an individual sovereignty. So I find it very interesting that, and we can even see this in like modern Alcatraz, that a lot of the ones that tend to be very racist, that they'll wear these symbols, they end up actually destroying themselves. Yeah. Because what Thor, he smashes giants, he smashes that ego, that narcissistic ego that's out of control. And by wearing a symbol or runes like that, you are asking for a transformation. And that transformation, it was a charge that they held it for a while, but then they could not maintain it, and it ended up destroying them.
There's absolutely no racism in the sagas, in the Eddas, in the Irish annals. There's absolutely no racism in Hinduism. Right. There's no where's the racism? It's in the Bible, the Book of Ham. The people who have dark skin and wide noses are the people of the devil. The people that betrayed the daughters and sons of Israel, and they must be punished for walking away from Jehovah. That's where the racism is. There was no racism in the Roman Empire. There was no racism in the Greek Empire. They didn't exist. The Hindu Kush didn't have racism because it was multiracial. The racism came in. So ironically, that these so-called neo-pagans who are practicing these racial ideas are behaving more Abrahamic than pagan, because there's zero racial hatred and the fact that the Vikings traveled to places like Baghdad and met with Native Americans in Canada without having to exterminate them the way Christians did tells you all you need to know about what the real attitude of pagans is towards other races and other cultures. We have no problem at all with them. None at all.
Right, and it gets back to that point that you say, when you look at the animist or the pagan mindset, as a pagan, I don't give two fucks whether someone is working with the Hindu pantheon, the Greek pantheon. It doesn't matter, because this animist mindset, you can trace it back down to nature, that it's representing archetypes that are in nature. So even though they may be called by a different name or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's only when you get into the Abrahamic mindsets that there's this need for centralizing the belief system to where everybody believes exactly the same thing and trying to convert people. Where, if we look at the Viking Age, even, they were just great explorers and merchants. And if something was practical, they would incorporate that into their culture as well.
Exactly. Like, I'm glad you brought up the Viking Age. It's perfect for what you just reminded me, Dan. I come from Dublin. Now, Dublin it was a Norwegian Viking city. Now, it existed before that, but they made it a major trading center. Actually, it was the second city of the Viking world for hundreds of years. Now, they revived. Now, that's what the name Dublin comes from, a sort of a transliteration of Norse, Gaelic, Irish, the Blackpool, Dublin, and they revived paganism in Ireland because they came back and they brought back paganism. And so the Irish language name in the old days for Dubliners, people from Dublin, were called the Tomar Muntir, or the Muntir Tomar, which means the people of Thor. Now, you're going to love this story. I grew up in the north side of the city, and in a built-up urban area, in like a high, what you call projects, a poor working class tower block area. And there was a forest nearby that was amazing. It was ancient. It was ancient, and it was only there because the land belonged to some lord in the old days, and he died off, and then there was all kinds of things of who owns the land, but it was walled off old ancestral estate. And we could literally go from these inner city tower blocks that we lived into an ancient forest. And it was a magical thing. And that was a huge part of my growing up. Now, wait for this. The first monotheistic monstrous king of Ireland was a guy called Brian Boru. Brian Boru was a king of Munster who basically made a deal to be at Tara. There was no such thing as the High King of Ireland. No, that's how the Irish pagan kings were, and even the Christian kings under the Breton laws. There was a king for each province, but not a king for the country. And if there was a king crowned for the country, if he messed up, he was executed. He was executed. And that was what the Breton laws, that came from pagan times. This guy ignored the kings at Tara and crowned himself the King of Ireland from his own place in Munster, and then decided to go on a Christian crusade to attack the Vikings in Dublin. On his way there, he sent a dispatch of a soldier. He was successful too. On his way there, he sent a dispatch of troops to destroy a woods north of the city that was Thor's Grove. And I'm pretty convinced that that was the woodland that I played in as a kid. He just told them to destroy the idols, wiped them all out, and he reconquered the city for Christianity. Now, at that, I'm absolutely convinced that woodland. Now, the name of the town that it was in was called the Santry, which means the Shantry, meaning the land of the old tribal people. So the part where the wood was mentioned in the Irish annals was in the north of the river, in a place where the old tribes lived, the Shantry, and I'm convinced that I was actually touched. Some ancestral codes were unlocked, and that was the wood where that took place. And that was Thor's Grove. This stuff comes back and grabs you and captures you and finds you. It's like it finds you. It finds you, and it will find everyone eventually. And it's through these amazing synchronicities you discover these things.
Yes.
And and that's what and now you have and then now in Dublin, you go there today, the whole tourist industry is marketed there, and this is a Viking city. This is a Viking city. They push that big time. And the TV show Vikings, which I think is horrible anyway, is made just down the road. So, and it's made in a place called Glendalough. That's where the movie studios are. And Glendalough is where Odin's Grove is. And that's where they used to build the longships from. They used to get the harvested timbers, old pagan and what were the Vikings doing? Living in harmony with the Celtic pagan gods.
Mm-hmm.
Why? There was no conflict. Why should there be? Same archetype.
Right. Yeah, just different name.
Yeah, different name.
Yeah, that's it.
Or a culture, or an environmental variation. Obviously, you're not going to have an ice god in Turkey.
Right.
You know, you'll have a sand god or something like that. But ultimately, it's just other than that, other than the environmental, local, archetypal, requirements, they're all the same. They just have different names.
Right.
And that really brings home the destruction that Abrahamic religions do.
Right.
They destroy diversity.
This whole idea of coexist and everything, it's a real nice idea. It makes a great bumper sticker and everything. But the problem with that is the animist mindset is more compatible with that idea. It's it's a personal relationship that you have with nature, with the gods, whatever, versus the escalating like imperialist mindset of monotheistic religion. And it starts with the evangelism, and that's just the moderate, tame version of it. Is I need you to believe what I believe, so just let me save your soul. And they can't leave well enough alone. They can't respect the sovereignty of the individual, and then that just keeps festering, and then it actually turns into the sword, essentially.
Well, you look at pagan Rome, 1 million people living in a city, right, before the Christians took over, that was incredibly diverse from all over the empire. There were Hindus there were Celts there were Teutons there was Celtic Iberians there was everything in a very diverse city with 1 million people 2,500 years ago. They built infrastructure that's still working today, right? They built infrastructure, viaducts, drainage systems. They were dealing with public sanitation issues that 2,500 years ago. When Christianity took over, in the Middle Ages, millions of Europeans in cities were dying because of the Black Death, because there was no sanitation systems. There was no hospitals. There was no viaducts. They were given prayer and told to wait to die. Pray to God, you might get to heaven. And so that was true diversity, because even with all that diversity in Rome at that time, they still built a phenomenal, nothing had been built like that on this earth to this day, in terms of, for the time anyway. And there's still infrastructure, that city built by pagans 2,500 years ago, that's still working today. Where in Catherine Nixby's book, it was incredible some of the stuff that happened. They didn't even know how to build scaffolding after a while, because they had destroyed the symposia and the guilds, or what the early form of guilds, where the artists didn't know how to sculpt statues anymore. They've been driven out. They'd run off to Persia, or they've been killed, or been made unemployed. And they showed, like, you see what like the standard of Roman and Greek pagan classical sculptures, incredible. The stuff that was built 2,000 plus years ago. Well, by the 4th and 5th century, it was like childish, like carvings. They couldn't do it anymore because they had destroyed everything. 70% of the knowledge, philosophy, artwork, science of the pagan classical world was destroyed by the iconoclasts. Yeah. That's why all the statues all have smashed noses, or they all thought there was demons in them.
Right.
It is a catastrophe. Now, when I hear people saying Native Americans, quite rightly going on about the Europeans came over, destroyed everything, the Mayans came over, like humans. It's not the Europeans came over and destroyed your culture. It was the Christians, and they did it to our people first.
Right.
The first victims of imperialism, of that kind of conquest, was the European pagans. We were attacked first. We were attacked first.
Right. Yeah, and that's something we've spoken about in previous episodes on here in a cycle that we called it a white guilt, the political version of original sin. And this, this idea that, a lot, especially here in the West, the left very much pushes this idea of white guilt without understanding the history and trauma behind why all these different atrocities happen. And that it's just trauma compounding on trauma, and hurt people. So when you start this cycle, it's very, you start factoring epigenetics and everything like this in. These cycles become very, very hard to break. And, but but I do think we see this in our modern time that we are here, that people are becoming aware of these intergenerational traumas. We see this resurgence to the pagan mindset and looking at yourself and learning how to heal and learning how you interact with the world and nature around you. It's all being brought to the surface. So I think we see a lot of this playing out in a lot of different ways. But it really is amazing to me, the amount of information, like I said, that is coming out and being accepted, just like we talked about the book, The Darkening Age, and how that's a bestseller even now, when, 10, 20 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been the case.
I remember when The Life of Brian came out, the Monty Python film, that you had, like, I'm old enough to remember when that came out as a young kid, watching BBC and seeing John Cleese defending against these intellectuals saying, but you have committed blasphemies. And he goes, well, if you watch the movie, it's not actually about Jesus Christ. It's about another character. And you've made fun. That, how we've gone from that to where we are now in my lifetime is incredible. I mean, the Ireland that I was born into was completely controlled by the Catholic Church. Now the churches are empty. They're closing down. And they're laughed and mocked at. And they've lost all their power, and we have a gay Hindu prime minister. Now that's how things have come around, they've lost everything.
What's interesting about that, I was raised in a Christian home, and my mom would talk about how the agenda, of the ones in media, that control everything, are trying to always destroy Christianity and Christian values, and it's just this agenda. And in a way, she's correct. There definitely is, because those in power and control are moving everyone to a new world order religion. Yeah, kind of a even more homogenized idea.
New age.
Right. But at the same time, what we're talking about is not that. In fact, it's pretty much the exact opposite of that. And so it's kind of interesting to see that dichotomy of these things playing out, and how somebody without understanding what's happening at the roots of this wouldn't be able to discern one from the other.
Well, their version of the elitist version of New Age is very disturbing, I find it. I find it gives me the creeps on every level. Like, for instance, a lot of it comes out of Blavatsky's work. And Blavatsky, her idea of Luciferianism is the belief that Lucifer is the devil. And she plays the Abrahamic aspect, which is, if she was the great scholar some people say she was, they would be immediately aware that Lucifer isn't even in the Bible. It's a mistranslation. This is what I find amazing. Just go back and look. It's been known forever that this has been the truth. But anyway, they have this it's the belief of, there's no such thing as evil, and then you say, it's only how you relate to it, and then I'd say, okay, I can understand that, but what do you mean by how you relate to it? We will set the parameters of what's evil and what isn't. Okay, that's not relating then. We're back to the old thing again of dogma. The thing of that we all must coexist, as a hive mind, as a board. Now, instead of even this thing like this Greta Thunberg kid that they're parading around at the moment, she is the establishment New Age Virgin Mary. That's what she is. Right. You're seeing just how creepy they are when you see them worshipping a 16-year-old girl that looks like she's 9, that kid clearly has problems. There's something not right there. The kid is, and I watched that performance today at the United Nations, and you had all these bureaucrats cheering her at the end. It's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen in my life. It's very disturbing. It's an exploitation of a kid who doesn't even know what she's saying. She's given lines to spew. It's just creepy, and it shows what their New Age or Sioux Age is. It's a spiritual blob where it means whatever they want it to mean.
More relativism. That we're the center of our own realities, so we just get to make up what's true and what isn't, and so what's right and wrong is just what's pragmatic for me, you know, that kind of thing.
As long as it doesn't violate the edicts of the control grid, which is that, like, okay, I have a belief in absolute freedom, in the sense that once you're not hurting another person directly, you're not doing any harm. So if you hate Chinese people, so suppose you hate Chinese people, once you keep that in your head and in your home, and don't go down and beat up Chinese people, don't deny them legal, you know, any kind of, like, if they wouldn't collapse on the street, you'd leave them there and don't call an ambulance or try to hit them with your car. If you have a problem with any other group, or for some reason, and you keep that personal to you, well, what harm are you really doing?
Exactly.
And the only one you're harming is yourself. Yourself,
exactly.
Right? You're only harming yourself. Now, so what is the worst thing that can come from that is you may attain enlightenment. That you might start asking yourself, why do I hate Chinese people?
Sure.
Where if they have a situation where they are saying you can't dislike someone because they're this, that, and the other, you're never going to ever explore why. You're only going to build up the shadow part of it by feeling that you're being prevented from a natural feeling, right? This is it. It's once you're not harming anybody, there's no problem, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
and it's really that simple.
Yeah. So and what does that really tell us about them? That they despise privacy
and freedom.
That's it. They despise privacy.
And very interesting that they're, you know, we were talking about the Nazi part earlier. They very much absolutely utilized using the youth, using the children, as the famous quote goes, whoever owns the youth owns the future. And what do we see the new socialists doing? I mean, it's the same. There's no new tricks in their playbook. It's just the same old bullshit over and over again. They just shovel it into a new pile.
Because it works. Why would they change?
Well, it comes from Abrahamics as well. The Children's Crusade. That's the brown shirt. The Hitler Youth movement. The Pol Pot's. Remember, he was a European educated intellectual. He went to the Sorbonne. They were the communist youth committees in China and everywhere else in Kampuchea were all based on the Children's Crusade, as is this latest nonsense.
Right. Well, we saw that, you know, you can see this a lot, you know, with Prussia as well, and the development of the education system, you know, and how a lot of the aristocracy there, if you trace back their blood, they're going back to Prussia blood. And a lot of people never even fucking heard of Prussia, or how important of a military power it was in the structure, and how things that are playing out still to this day directly go back to there.
Oh, big time. Prussia is like, this is you know, Frederick II. Prussia was the Google of the Enlightenment ages. It was the most powerful nation on earth. These people were way ahead of everybody, and they developed. You know, in the Prussian army, you were more likely to be killed by an officer than you were by the enemy.
Enemy, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Because they battered the shit out of. They battered the shit out of the troops, and they were the ones who, like, when the Franco-Prussian War happened, the French troops spoke about how the Prussian troops, they were like automatons.
Right.
They had no. The word robot hadn't been invented, but they were compared to the automatons. They were machine men. They were not, unlike any other soldier that had ever fought in Europe. Well, as soon as that happened, what did every other power in Europe and even the United States do? They found out that the Prussians had started it in the primary school system. Just literally from 6 and 7 year olds up, marching them in their heads, times tables, 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 2, 3 times, that's marching, that's left brain marching.
Right.
And that's why everything was, before that, the education system was, well, we're going to learn about history today, we're going to learn about art, we're going to learn how to read and write, and that's all you need to know, and get out of school. The Prussians developed education system as a way of creating a structural mind, because they were the first to realize that there was something about before they knew about neuroplasticity and, you know, mind memory and epigenetics. They knew that if you train the person from an early age, that they would have that all their lives. And that's why everybody adopted the Prussian system, this education system. You know, and Prussia doesn't exist as a nation anymore. But I got news for you. They kind of rule the world in a way. They rule the world, yeah. All the royal families are all Prussians or Hessians, same, very clear, you know.
Right.
The British royal family are about as British as I don't know, Muammar Gaddafi. They're you know, up at the time of George III, they, up until Queen Victoria, they were all sitting in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Palace. They couldn't even speak English. They all spoke German. Plattendeutsch, Old German. Every royal family that still existed, the Swedish royal family, the Prince Rainier, the Spanish royal family, believe it or not, they're all Prussians.
Yeah, one we still see it today in our society. Like even, you know, specifically with the automaton. You know, I was a young dumb man at one point in my life, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17, like right when I got out of high school, and that you very much still see this. You know, in the modern services, of that they tell you they're doing it. They will tell you right to your face that they're brainwashing you and they're training you, and you still go along, aye sir, and do it. But when you see a group of like Marines function, you know, as a fire team where they're going after a goal, it literally is just this robotic, like working as a very cohesive unit. But if there's a goal there, like it doesn't matter what the fuck is in the way, like they will go after that and destroy it. And it doesn't matter the risk to themselves, their bodies, their friends. It's just there's a mission and it's complete the task. So very much into this left brain robotic mindset. Yeah.
And it's also a terrible tragedy, because you look at the young men's and say the US Marines or any of those elite fighting forces around the world who've been indoctrinated under that Prussian system. They're at the peak of manhood in many ways. They're incredible physical condition. Have tremendous focus and concentration. What you need more than anything else for magic, right? That's what you need the most of. They're very good at problem solving. There's, you know, the way the officer structure set out. It's absolutely. If it wasn't military serving governments and corporations, you would say that is a fantastic way to bring out the best in people and then put them into society with all their faculties brought to the max to do good work, to do good things for themselves and their families and their friends and their communities. But what happens to them? They end up with post-traumatic stress, you know, on drugs, or alcoholics, or committing suicide. They're used and they're brought to the ultimate level that a young man can be brought to, and then they're just thrown away.
Sacrificed.
Yeah, it's sacrifice.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
It's indicative of, you know, what we talk a lot about on this channel in regards to balance, is that speaking of one side of imbalance is not to demonize that side at all. The left brain is an amazing tool that can be, you know, utilized for very, very useful things. It's the left brain programming like a machine, absent the right brain feminine of creativity and passion and care. That's where things go wrong. And that's exactly what you see in that soldier sort of mentality. Lack of care for other living things, just obliterate and destroy, and just following orders literally like a computer program, just execute commands.
Yep, soul dire. Yeah.
Yes, soul dire.
Yeah, I have, because of my previous, I get an awful lot of people from the U.S. military and people who served in the Gulf, British Royal Marines and stuff like that. I have an awful lot. I have a big following of people who went to the Gulf, a big following, both Americans and British, and I spoke to lots of them, and it's had some of the saddest stories. But here's one thing I want to tell you. Every one of them came back saying what happened in the Middle East in the Gulf War II particularly, was a supernatural experience. All of them had supernatural experiences out there in the war.
Yeah, gin attachments and things.
Oh well,
bringing back, yeah.
they're in. I've got a friend who was in the Marines, U.S. Marines. It said they're in that these jinns are coming back inside equipment, It's not only inside soldiers, but inside service weapons, equipment that's being brought back. And they all had stories of like things they saw in the desert, things they'd witnessed that were beyond. And these were like, you know, straight up hard-nosed American young guys that wouldn't think about things like that, who were just in combat situations, and they were telling me stories of like they would see these lights moving across the desert, and when when battles were over, there were strange noises and sounds and voices they would hear, and all of them were very spiritually affected by it. But because they were raised in Christian homes, they came back feeling that they were cursed or possessed or something like that. They didn't. There was something happened in that Gulf War II, because it was in the aftermath of the ritual of 9/11. It came with enormous amount of spiritual baggage,
right?
And as that, you know, I you know, when 9/11 happened, that was a stargate that opened. Reality was smashed,
massive
fractured.
energy harvesting.
But also disrupted the reality. We're not living in the same reality that we existed before 9/11. And you know, I try to tell this to people: forget the conspiracy. You'll never get to the bottom of that. It's too. There's so many traps. Forget about that.
Right.
Look at all the weird things that happened before and after relating to it. The foreshadowing, the predictions in art and movies and television. That was a blast back from the future, going back into the past, because a seismic event was coming. Event was coming, and that's why all these conspiracy guys who were right to notice this stuff. They say, oh, they were giving us they were leaking predictive or whatever. No, it wasn't. It was foreshadowing. Like Carl Jung says, artists. Exactly. It was such the whole planet watching the thing. It blew it back in time, and that's what it was. A quantum event. It was a quantum event, and it was a deeply spiritual event, and and then you have the Gulf War II right after, and that's why that has left a profound. And they had the jinn thing. I don't know what that is, but it's very, very real. It's very real.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think, you know, we see a lot of these kind of like these Middle Eastern entities. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that they can come back in equipment as well, because the internet is another realm. You know, with electronics is another realm. They're playing. You know, you've done a talk on Quran's on 333 that I thought was just absolutely amazing. But that thing, you can see it. I mean, anywhere you go and look, just rampantly feeding. And you know, I will keep a few of those kind of types that tend to get leashed out to things like that and keep them kind of around as little, like, you know, test gerbils to gauge the psychic energy of what's going around. Because you can tell when these things are feeding, because there'll just be waves of people just like losing their shit and going on like these feeding frenzies where they're just, exactly. They get smear campaigns and they're just trying to pull all the energy they can.
Or wickedness, like animal torture. If I wake up at 3:00 in the morning here in Ireland and go onto Facebook, all the crazy paddies are up, posting execution videos, animals, and even the ones that claim to be vegans, they'll be posting videos of horrible animal killings and stuff like that. All the blood gore, all the gore porn happens. If I'm up at breakfast time, the American weirdos are all up posting at 3 a.m. there. They're at 3 a.m. posting all that stuff. It runs around the planet like a virus, and it's all on the internet, and you can see it. I'm always telling people, observe the psychic weather. And that's the beauty of social media and Facebook. That is psychic weather forecasting and prediction. Big time.
Absolutely.
Why is my news feed today full of images of animals being killed? Quran's on is feeding, or whatever, the digital jinn, whatever it is, it's feeding. All this, you know, you just think of all the psychic energy poured into the internet. Pornography, fellas whacking off, right, and then pouring into the screen. Where's that psychic energy going?
Yeah, all that sexual charge, all of it is just being, put right out. Yeah, exactly.
And then, this quantum computing thing really does. It's, here we are. Get ready, folks, because it's going to get even stranger. This is nothing. Nothing.
Yep. And think about your phone has a camera on it. It's constantly feeding information, whatever you're putting in front of it.
Yeah, and it's a black mirror. It's a scrying mirror.
Right. Yeah.
It's a scrying mirror. Point. You turn your phone sideways. That's a scrying mirror. It's a black mirror.
Right.
And mirrors. I find mirrors fascinating. Maybe because of the most successful magic rituals I've ever done, including making myself disappear and shapeshift, were done in front of mirrors. I don't know what a mirror actually is. I still don't know. It's not just the reflection. This is why the oracles of Greece stared into bowls of water. This is why they looked at reflections. A reflection is not just that's another reality looking back at us. Even things like, why do letters appear backwards and nothing else doesn't?
Well, what's coming up for me is there's something about this involutionary force of the universe that's all about inversion. And think about the reflection of a mirror isn't just a duplication, it's an inversion. It's literally like a total exact flip of reality. Just interesting to think about.
Oh, big time, and especially in that the whole world is staring at mirrors on their smartphones and their iPads. And it's where does reality begin and end? I went to see Roger Waters' The Wall in Dublin a few years ago in a big huge stadium. This was like a fantastic gig, and I was like, it was the only one of the big bands I'd never seen was Pink Floyd. So I said, I'm going to see this. Literally, I would say half the stadium were holding up their iPads and watching it through the iPad.
Through the screen. Oh,
right.
That was more real to them than what was taking place on the stage.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's amazing how people, without understanding technology is a very useful tool, but without understanding the tool, you can most people end up just getting stuck or pulled into totally different realities, and they're oblivious of what's actually going on right around them.
Yeah, and the control grid has them. It has them.
Yeah.
And then then we bring it back to paganism again. Like, I think pagan people use the internet very healthy. They use it in a very healthy way. Like just what we were talking about, using it for psychic weather, finding things about looking up ancient sites. We're not waiting for the news to tell us what to do or think. We're off on our own little exploration.
Right.
And as it's meant to be, as a tool. It's not owning you. You're in control.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so great for us. It's great. Look at us right now. The internet has been the best thing that ever happened to paganism. Big time.
Absolutely.
Big time. And it's again, they're terrified of us. I know that. You know what? Like you were saying, Logan, I think it was Logan said at the beginning, they're terrified of us. You know why they're terrified of us? Because they don't know how to handle us.
Right.
We don't have I know somewhere out there, these George Soros types or someone are going, these pagans these European pagans we're popping up all over the internet that the algorithms are picking up. What do they want? And then he'll have a focus group who'll go and search and look up guys like us and people like us and scenes like us. And then he goes, well, boss, we had a look at all those pagans out there. And he goes, what do they want? And they go, they want nothing. They want nothing.
Absolutely.
Thomas, this is why they can't. This is why we bewilder them. Because we're not after anything.
Your work on psychopathy is absolutely some of the best out there, in my opinion. So you understand better than anyone that in order to control someone from a narcissistic mindset, looking out, you need someone to need something from you. And when you understand your sovereignty and you don't need anything from anyone else, you are totally whole and complete as you are. You're unfuckwithable. You're uncontrollable.
Yeah, there's no bait that they can put on the hook to catch us.
Right.
Exactly. Like I could just imagine these like the Fabian Society and saying, well, Well, what do they do? Well, they go and look at old stones, and they walk around in the woods, and they go watch birds migrating, and they they like rock music. They like they like look. We don't know what they want. I could just see them having like nervous breakdown. Well, what can we make them want? And they go,
Right.
well, they seem pretty happy as they are already.
Yeah.
We bewilder them. But we also have to be careful, because they will try to weaponize it by these racist these racist pagans. They will try to push them to the fore.
Right. Yeah. Because they still have the trauma to play on, and that's the thing. With the psychopath, not only do you have to get them to want where they need something from you, or you need something from them, but they have to get you to accept their mindset.
Yeah,
their mind virus, like in a little mini-me version of it. So then you will buy all their gaslighting and all their bullshit.
Oh yeah,
right.
and there's no you cannot name one pagan leader in the world today. They don't exist. Show me one. They don't exist.
Yeah.
Well, and what you're talking about, I think I like to call social terrorism. It's the same thing that social justice and feminism and third wave feminism and all these things. That's exactly what that is social terrorism. They're using fear of ostracization and ridicule and being called these horrible names, and then they're lumping pagans in with racist or this and that. I mean, there's all these buzzwords that they love to just throw out there, misogynist or racist or homophobic or whatever. It's working.
It is working, but it depends on your attitude towards it. You can still, it doesn't have to change your mind on the inside. Let me tell you what the greatest pagan victory would be. The greatest pagan victory, and one I probably won't see in my lifetime, but I want it more than anything else. I want African Americans to rediscover their paganism.
Oh yeah,
because that would be incredible.
Sure.
Right.
But that's something we talked about in that White Guilt episode. Is that they've been so subjugated in our American culture, yet they still practice the religion of their oppressors to this day.
Yeah.
And it blows my freaking mind.
Well, just like the Irish did, and just like the Scandinavians and the Germans did, the day will happen when that will change.
Mm-hmm.
When that will change. And it will happen. It'll come. But the day that happens, that is the end of the psychopathic control grid in America, because they will have lost this ability. What will happen then? They will just lose this ability to play all the games they play. You have the largest ethnic group in the United States, probably them and the Hispanics. And that's another one we want to go back as well. It's game over then. Because
you lose the victim mentality goes away.
And then everybody's getting on great. And then there's, suddenly a ghetto is not a ghetto, it's a tribal homeland. It's a different dynamic. You're not here because you're a prisoner. You're here because you're celebrating your culture and you're in pagan African spiritual traditions. Right. I mean, that would be, and the extent of the poison of the Abrahamic mind virus. One of the most impressive tribal groups in the world are the Dogon people of West Africa in Mali and Mauritania. These are the people that knew Sirius was a binary star. Right. They were the last tribe on Earth to still have free association. That's what Carl Jung noticed, that they actually knew what each other were thinking telepathically. Now, I wouldn't say telepathically. It's almost like they could communicate by... Look, anyone who's had a dog knows how facial gestures... You can have an entire conversation with a dog with your facial gestures or your body movements. Well, that's what the free association communication thing... That's what they could... They're all being forced into Islam right now. Right. And we're going to lose the last great pagan tribe of Africa. The last link to our Aboriginal humans ever. Anywhere. It's gone now. And it's like, okay, where are the great multiculturalists? Why aren't they in West Africa right now protecting the Dogon?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, because that's a tribe that, I mean, they're to look into. They're extremely interesting, and like you said, the fact that they knew that Sirius B was actually, two different stars.
Yeah.
They've known this for thousands of years. It's been, passed on. That there's something to that. It's because they still have the knowledge of how to travel there within themselves, because they understand that everything that is out there is you. There's also an access point within you.
Yeah, it's like they didn't just look at the stars. Maybe things like maybe when you have such maybe when you're so disconnected from modern man, and you have that free association mind again, maybe things like astral traveling are incredibly easy.
Right.
Literally projecting your conscious outside your body. Maybe that's a lot, and they actually went into space that way.
Right.
Maybe all our pagan ancient ancestors did. I'm talking about back in Neolithic times. Maybe they all did, and there's certainly lots of things when you look at European shamanism, like the leftovers, like the Benedate, who were the last shamanic group in Italy. That's that amazing book by Carlo Ginzburg, The Night Battles. And they talk about all this kind of thing, the fairy doctors from Ireland, going to other worlds and stuff like that, and being careful that something doesn't go wrong or they'll be trapped, again. I was in the US recently, and I went to the Lovecraft convention, the Necronomicon in Providence, and they had some great panels that on paper looked amazing. And one of them was about, these people started talking about DMT and entheogens and stuff like that. And I'm going, oh, this will be really good. And it starts off really good. There was like a guy there who was like a Satanist, and this guy, you're talking about Terence McKenna and all this stuff. And I'm saying, oh, we're really on this could be a great talk. And then suddenly this guy goes into this whole thing that, well, if you look at the Bible, and you look at the Bible, that, and then my rabbi says this, and my pastor said that. And it was like, it was completely destroyed. And I nearly caused a riot at it. I went as a civilian. Just because I'm a massive Lovecraft fan, and I believe his work is he was creating the American pagan pantheon. And there was one lecture, a discussion panel on the idea of sacredness in his work. And there was all these people, they had these academics talking the biggest lot of bullshit you ever heard in your life, missing the point. And then I asked the question, and I said, as someone who's not of an Abrahamic mind, a monotheistic mind, and who's who's interested in the occult from a practice point of view, it's inconceivable to me that someone like Lovecraft could develop this whole pantheon of gods from scratch and it just being fiction. It's too perfect. It reminds me of John Dee and Enochian. It's just too perfect. And then I said, and they had their jaws open. And then I said, wait to hear this one. If you examine, and literally you can hear a pin drop everyone's head, because they'd never heard anything like this before. I said, if you examine Lovecraft's work in the context coming from either a Hindu or Indo-European polytheistic mind, it's completely different than a monotheistic Abrahamic mind, because suddenly these outer space gods and inner space entities are not evil. It's your reaction towards them that is what causes your own destruction. And then these academics, they were like gobsmacked listening to this, and there's just some idiot in the audience who just asked this question. And then the guy, I'm waiting for the answer, waiting for this like really interesting answer, and he goes, I'm not kidding you, and the guy goes, well, we have better translations of the King James Bible now. That was the answer to my question.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so
full story, bro.
Yeah, but it was great because a few people came up to me afterwards and says, finally. And we went down to the pub and had a great night.
Nice.
That was the final. It was like, that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
That's what we're up against. Their imagination is even stifled.
Yeah, it's stagnant. Yeah. It's dead. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Well, let's see. Guys, got any last minute little things we want to cover here at all?
I feel that's a pretty good stopping
Yeah.
point. We're right about 2.5 hours, maybe.
Cool.
Well, that
and
flew.
Oh, I know. I honestly, like, we'd love to have you back, and there's so many other
Oh,
topics.
anytime.
No, I'd be delighted, and I'll hopefully have a webcam the next time.
Yeah,
I'd be delighted to do that.
Okay.
Nice. Well, can you let people know where to find you, Thomas?
Yeah, my main website is www.mossuponstones.com. I've got 3 YouTube channels. Thomas Sheridan, which is basically the Velocity of Now radio broadcaster on there, and I do a lot of comedy and satire as well. That's on there too. And my occultic channel with a lot of the megalithic stuff from the past and pagan stuff is Open Source Occult TV. But my main channel going forward for all this stuff we're talking about tonight is Beyond Room 313. There's lots of stuff on there we've spoke about tonight. I want to produce better quality films, better production. So basically, Open Source Occult is a vlog channel, more or less at this point, talking about occultic subjects. But the future is Beyond Room 313. I want to make full-length feature documentaries on all the topics we're talking about here tonight that are produced properly, look good, and are presented in such a way that you can show it to your Christian or your atheist friend without some Irish guy going, the Pope is a dickhead and stuff like that. They're talking to them. There are lots of people I can reach talking to them that way, but there are other people I can't.
Right.
So in a more formalized way, it's horses for courses. Like, my satirical approach is great for some people. Others are like, I don't get this. The vlogs of where I might talk about paganism and to be like using typical like Irish language. Matter of fact, where I talk to my mates in the pub, that works for some people, but not for others. This is Beyond Room 313 will be what I do, structured, formalized, in a very accessible way as always, but with more like respectable. That's the word I would use.
Yeah, and
looks better.
Right.
I've got good cameras now, and I can. I want to make. I want these films to look great as well as give good information.
Sure.
Yeah.
So something for everybody. Something for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Excellent channel. If you guys haven't went and checked that out, definitely do that. And I definitely encourage people to look into your work, your written works as well, because they're all excellent books. Covering a wide variety of subjects. Definitely recommend the audience check those out.
Yeah, I think that the Druid, the 2 books for people who would like this podcast would be the Druid Code, Walpurgis Night, and Sorcery. But I would get the Druid Code first.
Yep.
Read that and then get Sorcery, because Sorcery is like part 2 of the Druid Code.
Right.
So they're parts 1 and 2. It's probably a good place to start would be the Druid Code, but also Walpurgis Night is a good place too if you're interested into the historical aspects of it. But look, the thing I would say to people is enjoy this stuff. This is the reason why I do this, for good and for bad, and it's 90% good, is because I absolutely love this stuff. I love it. I love what I do. It's, I have I could go back to have a regular day job and walk away from all this, but the reason is I absolutely love what I'm doing here tonight. It's, and I get to see other countries and meet people around the world for something that's basically a passion, and that's what you have to do in your life. Get into these topics, not because you think they're going to give you an answer to things. This is not religion. Get into them so you absolutely love them, and you will love them. And I got news for you: you'll be a much happier person, enjoying a better life. You'll have better relations. You won't be bothered by what's on the news. You won't be bothered because you will have moved towards a polytheistic mind that will see the world in archetypal ways, and suddenly the game is very, very different. And guess what? You have no umpire. You're in charge.
Wonderful. Great way to wrap up.
Yeah. And we'll put we've got links down in the description to all your books, your channels, and your website. Everybody highly encouraged. amazing work. You know, one of my favorite researchers and presenters out there by far. So
Well, thank you for
Thomas
that.
Sheridan, what an honor and a pleasure to have you. We'd love to
Yes.
have you back sometime, and this is going to conclude today's episode. But if you haven't yet, check out our website, thewizardfactory.com. If you enjoy content like this, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel. We do weekly videos covering all sorts of topics. And we will hope to see you next week for another episode. And until then, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.